Welcome to RECO12. I'm Justin. I'm your host and a grateful child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and an addict living in the miracle of recovery. RECO12 is all about exploring the common threads of addictions and sharing tools and hope from all those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, places, fellowships to learn and support one another. Our speakers represent a lot of different fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery, no matter our addiction or affliction. Today's speaker for the 238th meeting is John K., a first-time RECO12 speaker. Super excited, would love having first-timers. And today, John will be sharing his experience of personal and couples recovery, and I'm really happy that he'll be sharing on this topic, and I'm excited to hear about a new to me and a new to RECO12 12-step fellowship that he is part of. We'll get to his talk in the Q&A afterwards here in just a minute. First, for a little bit of business, RECO12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, or just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out the other podcasts, Noodle It Out with Nikki M., which releases every Tuesday, Big Book Roundtable, which releases every Thursday, RECO12 Shares, which we have now enough recordings that I'm going to release a new episode this week. Keep recording some of those shares. If you want to learn more about that, I'll put the link in the chat and in the show notes of the podcast. And to learn more, go to RECO12.com. That's RECO12.com to join our communities. Check out the chat and show notes. I'm also on the lookout to schedule other speakers for future RECO12 meetings. I'm scheduling into June right now and super excited about that. So if you're someone or know someone with a message to share, please reach out to me at RECO12pod@gmail.com. That's RECO12pod@gmail.com, and we'll get that ball rolling. RECO12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thank you this last week to Sean, Ethan, Justin, great name by the way, Justin, and Emma for being spearheads and supporting the RECO12 cause. If you would also like to support RECO12 and become a spearhead, visit RECO12.com/support or click on the links that I'll put in the chat and the show notes for one-time or monthly donation options. Your support makes a difference in keeping us able to share these messages of recovery. Now, we look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. And I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, John K., and give a little background on him. John belongs to AA and Recovering Couples Anonymous, RCA. Early in sobriety, he became a single parent to 3 kids due to his ex-wife's addictions. While AA became a way of life, John found great difficulty in applying the principles in his marriage. Although he wasn't drinking, he would withdraw under emotional pressure. John joined RCA in 2019 and started a recovery program in his marriage. Today, he actively tries to merge his higher power in his recovery, marriage, and faith. Take it away, John. Go ahead and come off mute. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is John. I'm an alcoholic. I found out about RECO here a few weeks ago when a friend invited me to hear him speak. And so they looked for a speaker and said, well, yeah, I've got a message I can share. So I thought I'd go ahead and sign up for this and hopefully be a benefit to y'all as it is to me. I started drinking when I was 8 years old. My parents wanted to socialize, so they went to a state-run liquor store in New Hampshire and bought a bunch of booze and brought it all home and put it down in the basement. And me being the little kid that I was, I found that down there, and there's some sweet-tasting wine or whatever. So I grabbed the bottle, and I popped the top on some grape wine, and I chugged a bunch of it and put the top back on it and put it back in the box. And that was the last time I ever put a cap back on a bottle. I believe truly that I drank alcohol from the time that I started. I was scared to death the day my father was upstairs washing the dust off the bottles, and his wine bottle was, half empty. Nothing was ever said. Didn't get in trouble for it. I'm not sure they knew I did it, but anyway, needless to say, that was 50 some odd years or 60 some odd years ago, so it doesn't really matter today, I guess. But I didn't drink anymore until I was about 15. My parents, they split up when I was 11 for a while, and they split up finally when I was 14. I ended up spending a couple years at my grandparents' home. And I was living with my grandparents in California, and my grandmother would go around and visit her friends in the afternoons and take me along, and her friends and her would share a highball or two, and they'd give me one. Of course I drank it, what the heck. And then when the opportunity presented itself, I raided the liquor closet. A couple hours later, the neighbors from downstairs were upstairs wondering what was going on. I was drunk as a skunk, rolling around on the floor, screaming, yelling. No idea what had happened, but I had consumed all the vodka in the house and set the stage for years of misery. That was the real beginning of when I started drinking alcoholically. I never drank socially. I always had to consume every bit of it that I could get. If it was put in front of me, I would drink it. If it was in the house, I would drink it. And if I didn't have it, no matter how drunk I was, I would find a way to go get it. That's what the disease was all about. I thought I was having fun. I thought I was entitled to drink. I wasn't hurting anybody. There was no problem with that. I went on, and that after that year, when I started drinking, I moved back to my father's. My father was in the process of getting remarried. I was just a burden. They really didn't want me there, but I hung around with all the boozers and druggies at school and managed to find them. And so, I continued my alcoholic drinking. Every time the party would start, I would miss it because I'd be passed out from having drank everything before I got there, and missed out on a lot of the fun that everybody claimed they were having with booze. But I was still having fun. It worked great. After high school, I joined the service, and everything there, when you were in your off hours, everything was about drinking. They'd have kegs of beer on Friday, and everybody go out drinking during the week. And so it just sort of kept everything going. People would come over to the house and drink. Um, 2 years into the service, I got married, and people would show up at the house, and we would drink. And I'd be passed out shortly thereafter. No telling what went on after I passed out. And I finished the service, and I went to college, and I took all my classes first thing in the morning so I could drink the rest of the day. That was a real convenient schedule. And I don't know how I made it through college, but I did. And by the time I got out of college, we had our second child, and I was taking my first job. So I moved down to South Texas for my first job, and the drinking got even worse because now I had a whole lot more money, and I kept going. Sometime during that first year of that job, I think between my ex-wife and my mother, they got me going to Alcoholics Anonymous. They said, "Oh, there's a meeting up the road. Maybe you ought to go to that." I don't remember how many false starts we had on that, how many times they tried to get me go, but one day I went, and it seemed like the place for me. It seemed like a real good opportunity for me. Hey, maybe there's something about this. I don't know. I liked it there. I wasn't sure of the magnitude of my problem. I wasn't sure of the magnitude of the issues. I wasn't certainly not sure of the damage I'd caused in the lives of other people. I thought I'd just been having fun, but I kept going. And the one thing I didn't do was I didn't stop taking drugs. And so I was smoking dope or snorting something or popping some pills. And about a year and a half into that, of going to AA meetings, I started drinking again. The first time I came into AA, about 80% of what I had, I estimate now at this stage, about 80% of what I had was gone. First time I came in. My marriage was on the rocks really bad. My job was iffy. My finances were pretty screwed up, but I was still making the house payment, and everything was going, sort of downhill, but hadn't quite hit rock bottom. Well, the second time I came in AA, everything else was taken away. It took just a few short months after I started drinking again that year to end everything. I ended my job. I ended my marriage. I walked away from everything. The house was going into foreclosure. My car's oil lights were all on. Life was just crazy, crazy, crazy. My last day of drinking, my father sat on top of me, and my best friend lay on the floor with the cap somewhere in the house, empty. I consumed every bit of alcohol I could. I had two small kids. My ex-wife and I were estranged at the time, and my father somehow, I'm not sure the sequence of events that occurred, but he was sitting on top of me so I couldn't get to any more booze until the paramedics got there and strapped me down and carried me away, right into the eyes of my 7 and 4-year-old children. There's Daddy being carried out. Fortunately, that was the last time I ever had to be carried out. I got put into the rubber room at the local hospital, and the next day I was transported to a rehab center up in near Houston, Texas. And I spent about 9 weeks there. Didn't get a whole lot out of the rehab. It was cool talking to everybody, but the thing that I really got out of it was that somebody was there coming to take us to meetings probably about 5 nights a week. We would go out to different places, to different meetings. There's AA and there was NA. And while I'd had the background in AA in my first couple of years earlier, it started clicking with me that there is something seriously wrong with me. I did not understand what it was, but I knew that if I didn't do something serious, that I was going to die from this disease. I had people all around me telling jails, institution, death. That's the next step. I didn't want to believe that, but I finally was getting to realize. I guess that was the time when I had the first real spiritual experience that said, I need to be doing something different. Because the first time I obviously didn't take it seriously. I thought I could keep, drugging my life away. And it was the alcohol that was the problem. The problem was me. I was the problem all along. I did not know that. I did not know that I had a spiritual malady. To me, today I still don't understand exactly what a spiritual malady means, but to realize, if I were to sum it up, I'd say that I had self-reliance, that I was going to handle this myself. I wasn't doing anybody any harm. I only needed me. And if you left me alone, I would be okay. And if you don't leave me alone, I will do what I have to do to make you leave me alone so I can be okay. And in the final couple of years of my drinking, I did most of it in my living room with the blinds drawn, kids and wife scared to the back corners of the house from violence that was occurring in the house. I just managed to create a little haven for myself that I could just get smashed. And I'd come to at 2 a.m. and try and find my way back to bed. And I'd try to get cleaned up enough for the carpool in the morning to get back to work. And it was just a terrible way to be living, but I didn't have the problem. Now that I'm in AA, things are a whole lot different. I've learned over time, and it didn't come all at once, that the spiritual malady required that to solve, I was going to have to latch onto a power greater than myself. That power I choose to call God. I'm a very, very staunch supporter of the separation of religion and AA. Okay. Although I do subscribe to my own faith, I do not bring that faith into AA meetings because I believe fully in the separation of religion and AA, in that last thing anybody wants to hear, and last thing that I wanted to hear coming into an AA meeting, was that somehow God was going to fix me and their church had the answer. I didn't want that. I hadn't been going to church at all prior to coming to AA. And so I realized that my problem was twofold. I had a mental obsession to drink. That's the disease, the obsession to drink. And then I had a physical compulsion that was set up if I started drinking. If alcohol entered my body, I could not stop. What is the saying? It's one drink is too many and 1,000 never enough. That was me. So I worked the program. Early on. I took my 2 kids. We had a third one in the oven. The third one got there 3 months or so after I got sober. So here's 3 kids. We're down in the middle of nowhere. I've got no job. The bank's in arrears. I'd been in rehab for 9 weeks. And. So it was time I started trusting in something greater than myself. So back down on the ground, not really running, but I'm back down on the ground. I'm out of rehab. Now what? Fortunately, I guess through the help of my higher power, I found another job in Houston rather quickly. So I did the process of moving up to Houston. I stayed with my brother a little bit, and I worked the job until I could get the rest of the family to come on up. I would go to meetings almost every night when I could. I was working shift work, so sometimes in the evening was kind of difficult. I'd get off after 12 hours. It was difficult, but I got to as many meetings as I could. And then when my family got up, I moved back to days, and I was going to meetings almost every night because I'd gone to rehab there. I knew where they all were. And during that 3-year period, I tried diligently to help my ex-wife find some recovery. She couldn't. Her end result was death. She died back around 2000 from this disease. It was horrible for the kids because the kids never had an opportunity to ever reconcile with her. She never recovered from this disease. I did. She didn't. Why did I survive and she not? I don't know. This disease isn't picky and it isn't choosy. It just takes whoever it takes. And there's no doubt in my mind the way this disease works. So about 3 years into the marriage, I became a single parent, and I started taking my kids to all the AA meetings. Smoke or no smoke, it didn't matter. If I was going to survive, I had to have AA. So I drugged my 3 kids to the meetings. I got them a nice little piece of candy and a soda, and they would sit there quietly and let me go to the meetings. And afterwards, we'd come home and worked AA. I had people from the meeting come over. We had a small group that hung around. I got involved in service work, and AA was starting to work in my life. Things were starting to happen. The chaos was gone. The cruelty was gone. The violence was gone. We seemed to be growing as a family. We were starting to recover. I divorced my ex-wife because one day I came home. My 3-year-old son was out in the street playing while she was passed out in the backyard. That was the final straw. I finally realized at that point that what my higher power gave me was truly a gift, and my ultimate responsibility was the protection of the children. Regardless of what I had done in the past, my new role was to protect the children. So I took the action to protect the children from their mother's drinking. She was driving around with them drunk as much as I had done. She was taking them to places she should never have taken them to get her drugs, and much like I had done, I guess. But anyway, we parted ways at that point, and I became the custodial parent. And the fellowship kept me together because I had no idea what I was doing. I did not know how to be a parent. I did not know how to be a husband. I did not know how to be a father. I was learning all this stuff on the fly, doing the best that I could. I was getting my kids involved in activities to do things so that they could, have some fun, and they were starting to enjoy that, and it seemed like things were going really, really good. And then I met this wonderful woman through Cub Scouts. She actually lived right around the corner from me. She was a single parent with two boys, and I convinced her to put her older son in baseball so I could take the two boys to baseball and she could pick them up afterwards. That's how we started seeing each other, because I had to take my daughter to softball in another part of Houston. And if you've ever been to Houston in the NASA area, there's a road called NASA Road 1, and in the afternoons it's crazy. And I had to take my daughter through that to softball practice. I could have never gone back and got the other kids. So she put her kid in baseball. And we started talking at baseball games and stuff like that on the weekends. And when they had the final end of the year party, we really started talking a lot more. And then we've been together ever since. So my higher power put someone in my life who was going to be able to help guide me through the rough patch, somebody who was going to help me do what I needed to do, and hopefully I'd be of some service to her. And so we thought it was a marriage made it. The whole thing just fell together real quick. I mean, just amazingly how it all fell together. I couldn't have scripted it any better. So here I am, about 3 years sober, with a new wife and 5 kids. We never went on a honeymoon. We did laundry on our wedding night and started work back on Monday morning. And, things seem to be really, really good. And here's where we'll start transitioning into the recovering couples part of it. I am an alcoholic. Okay. I have a series of serious character defects that I acquired probably before I started drinking, but then I poured a whole bunch of alcohol on top of it, and I became this monster inside. Alcohol taught me how not to piss you all off, but it did not really give me the tools that I needed to survive in a relationship where I had an emotional commitment. And giving the way that I drank, I'm not sure what kind of emotional commitment I really had or that I knew anything about what that meant. But after a while in our relationship, we moved to a small town in Texas and things were going well. But then I said, let's try another job. Let's try to grow up the ladder a little bit. So I took a job that started requiring me to travel. And so now here, this ex-alcoholic or this, recovering alcoholic, I'm traveling. And my wife is at home taking care of everything when we used to do all the stuff together. So I'd come home on the weekends and I didn't like the way she did this, and I didn't like the way she did that, and I didn't like how this happened, and why did you do it that way? So you can see where the problem started. My character defects. Why weren't you doing it my way? Well, I was so full of myself. And we get in terrible fights on Friday nights when I got home. And it was awful. And then after years of this, it continued getting worse. It got really bad. RCA is nowhere near in the picture at this. I thought I was just standing up for myself in my relationship, fighting for what I thought was right, doing my job as a husband and father, trying to push through everything that needed to be done and get it done right without giving her any credit whatsoever. My character defects, I know today, were in full bloom. My character defects helped me get what I wanted out of life. They did not help me get what I needed. And heaven forbid, I didn't have a clue as to what I needed. I really didn't. I know when I went to work, I needed to get a paycheck. I knew when I went to the store, I needed to get food. I had no idea what to get out of an emotional relationship. I did not know. I was emotionally neutral by the time I got to AA. My emotions have been squashed so much, I didn't know what any of it was. And if anything got too tough, what did I do? I ran. I ran and I hid. I was not going to go there with anybody. About 6 years ago, I retired. My wife retired a little bit before me. Now, all of a sudden, we're both home together all the time. With all these years of those Friday night fights, the struggles of me trying to assert my will around the house and do, all the kids were pretty much gone. We did have a daughter move back for a little while her husband was going to school, but my kids are pretty much gone. And now a new obsession came into place. A new obsession was identified. In addition to my obsession to drink, I now also had the obsession to blame. Everything was her fault. Why can't you do it my way? Why can't you do it? What do you mean you have an opinion on that? Why aren't you doing it? I told you how it needs to be done. I know the right way to do it. And on and on. And we were in this house together to the point where it just about totally came unglued. We loved each other. There's no doubt about that. I found out from uh, another friend about Recovering Couples Anonymous. Had met down at a place called the Bay Area Club here in League City, Texas, which is just south of Houston. And he said, "Hey, why don't you check this out with your wife?" Okay. We just gotten through another failed treatment session with a therapist. We had thought we had solved all of our problems and found a couple of weeks later the problems were right back. So we went to this Recovering Couples Anonymous meeting. We've been going there ever since July of 2019. We've been going very regularly, active in multiple groups and in service positions. So what did RCA teach us? RCA taught us that the problems we were experiencing weren't really our fault, that we both probably had acquired certain dysfunctions from our family of origin. And there's some of our fault, obviously, but we're building a big box here. That we acquired certain dysfunctions early on in life that have been carried on into adulthood. Dysfunctions, character defects, call them what you want. Same thing, you know. In my family of origin issue, I had learned to hide my emotions because emotions weren't allowed. My family was disrupted so many times because of my father's antics and stuff like that. We moved from here, we moved from there. Whenever my father went out and cheated on my mother, she got thrown into a mental institution. It's like Ralph and Herbie from Cheech and Chong. Every time he did something, she got the flea bath, right? She got put into mental institutions every time he cheated on her. She collapsed, and we got whisked away to the grandparents. And so when I was 11 years old, we're out living with the grandparents. Here we were living in a small town in Massachusetts. We could run around and do what we wanted to do. Now we were locked in the concrete jungle of San Francisco, hardly knowing anybody, not being able to ride our bikes wherever. Our whole life had totally changed, and we just, a year after that, we got back and moved again because my father couldn't hold a job. And we moved again to another area. And then he cheated on my mother again. She got whisked off to a mental institution. And then we lived with him for a year. And then he decided, well, I need to get a divorce. So he wanted to get a Nevada divorce and to go out there and get 6 weeks, no fault. So we moved to Lake Tahoe and for 6 weeks. And my mother finally said, look, if that's what you want, I'll give it to you. She was living in California. When they got divorced, I said, I don't want to live with you anymore. I want to live with my mother because I didn't like him at all. And that created a big fight. So I had no foundation, no boundaries, no sense of emotional stability with anything growing up. And so here I get into this relationship with this woman who's very emotional and very aware of her feelings. I didn't know how to respond. And so I developed something that was defined in a book called Intimacy Anorexia, which was I had a fear of intimacy, so I ran from it. I hid from it. I read the book that some friends told us about, and this book suggested that there are I think there are 12 different conditions that could or could not be present with intimacy anorexia. I had 11 of the 12. The only thing I had not done was physically cheat on my wife. And then I realized that I was taking this emotional withdrawal that I was causing, and then I was using it as a weapon against her. So when I was mad at her and she wanted me to talk, I would just shut up even more, driving her totally nuts because I'm not saying anything. She wanted answers and I wasn't giving them. So in addition to indirectly running away, I was directly running away, and I weaponized my character defects against my poor wife. When we started going through the book of Intimacy Anorexia, I started going through the stages of withdrawal of grief. There's a stage of denial, there's a stage of anger, there's a stage of bargaining. I realized I was going through these stages as we were working with a sponsor couple. I was pointing out, going through these grief stages, it's this main character defect that I had latched on to all my life, undefined, was being taken away, and I didn't know how to respond. How am I going to deal with somebody if I can't run and hide? Do I have to face the music? Do I have to do this? It was very, very frightening because the me that I had grown up with for 50, 60, I would see it 64, 62, roughly 62. The me I'd grown with was having to go away. I did not know how to respond. RCA is a 12-step program. We started working the 12 steps together with a sponsor couple. The 12 steps were taken from AA. The program claims to help us be able to restore our intimacy through working a 12-step fellowship. So my wife and I got all the workbooks and we worked through the steps with a sponsor couple. We still work through the steps today, and we have a new sponsor couple. We chose just to get some variety in what we do. We've worked the steps twice together, all the way, 1 through 12, just like AA. We've made amends. We worked on character defects. We wrote inventory. I'm saying it backwards. I should have said it the other way, but we did all that stuff. And today our marriage is very, very healthy. We're doing very well. One of the exercises we did in one of the books was called the genogram. We built a family tree together, and we labeled all the significant characters in the family tree. And we labeled them as to what A program they could or could not be in. My father, I put him in Sex Addicts Anonymous. My mother, I put her in Codependence Anonymous in AA. She was an alcoholic. And we did this for all the people. Oh my gosh, what a circus we had. When my wife and I got done putting down who belonged in what programs, we realized no wonder we're screwed up. Look what we had to learn from. And then it started becoming clear that it wasn't our fault we were fighting with each other. It was our fault how we responded and reacted to stuff. Okay, I'm not exonerating myself of any fault in the situation. But all of a sudden realized I was totally programmed to be doing what I was doing. I learned no other way. The people who were supposed to protect me when I was a little kid were not protecting me and did not protect me. The people who were supposed to care for me and nurture me along abandoned me. And I poured alcohol on that. Oh, I made quite a show out of it. It was just all blown out of proportion. So my wife and I work these steps, and we sponsor other couples, and we are active in several. In fact, we are volunteering to teach class at the 2024 convention in Syracuse, New York in August. We want to go up there. We want to be part of that. We've done retreats. Like I said, we work with other couples, and we're learning to talk with each other. We've learned to find a way to deal with, like AA has taught me, how to deal with the outside, to live life on life's terms under the guidance of a higher power. We operate our marriage now under the guidance of the same higher power, that we're able to survive each day, and we're to make the most out of it. We're able to do what we need to do. We have the one issue in our life that's a real big trigger for us, and that was the thing that got us into the last failed counseling session. And here a couple of weeks ago, something popped up in the margins of that particular incident, and it seemed like we were going to be back off to the races, and it stopped right away. I didn't have to fight with her about it. I expressed my opinion about the situation. That's all it took. We did not fight over it. About 2 months ago, my wife went in for an angiogram. We thought it was going to be routine. We were going home Friday night, party time. We had a cruise set to go on. We were going to have all this. Some doc says, you ain't going home. And all of a sudden, all this shit became really, really real. And my wife, 3 days later, had open heart surgery to correct a triple bypass situation. And I realized that all those years of fighting with her just didn't matter anymore. It didn't quite take that to jar me to reality, but that was the final push that, you know what, John needs to do something different in this relationship to ensure that I do not go back to the way that I was acting before, so that my wife and I can maintain the intimacy. And it's not sexual intimacy, it's total intimacy, emotional, spiritual, physical, mental, intellectual, total oneness with each other to do what we need to do as a coupleship to survive. In RCA, we've been to several talks where people have been there, and they've had situations much worse, seemingly much worse than ours. Ours was terrible for us. Okay,
they've had 3 minutes.
They had situations with multiple, infidelity, financial infidelity, and yet they managed to pull it all together and made a go of it. And we're working together as a couple again. I've come to believe that a power greater than myself, once I was able to fully concede that I was an alcoholic, I was able to survive and live a decent life as a recovering alcoholic. I found once I was able to believe and admit to myself that I had some responsibility to the failures in my marriage, then my wife and I then were able to start working things out. By following the principles of the AA fellowship and the RCA fellowship, I've got a happy life. I just got back from Eco Kids. I took 12 kids today out on nature class at the local wildlife center. I love kids. I wanted to be a park ranger once, but I ended up being a chemical engineer. And this is my chance finally of being a park ranger. Life is good. but I have to always realize where I came from. If I have the obsession to drink, I cannot be happy today. I need to work on my recovery on an active daily basis. If I have the obsession of blame, I cannot be in my relationship on a happy basis. So I have to work on that on a daily basis. And under the guidance of a loving, caring higher power that I choose to call God, I can do that if I continue to keep my priorities straight and follow the principles that I've been taught by these wonderful fellowships in my life. And I guess that's my time.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John. That was really good. I've written down several questions, and I want to remind our live audience, if you have a question for John, please type it in the chat. If you would like to remain anonymous and not have me introduce your or announce your first name in here, just type that in the chat before the question. We'll get to these questions as we go along. John, I'm really grateful for your share. It really opened my eyes, and I've got a lot of questions, both about your life and about the fellowships and everything that you belong in. And one of the things that you said early on, we'll start off here, was you realize that I am the problem. Tell us why it's so vital to acknowledge this and accept this, that it's me that's the problem and it's not all the other stuff that's going on around in the world.
Well, if I wasn't the problem, then I wouldn't need a moral inventory in step 4, because that's where I listed everybody that had harmed me, everybody I was mad at and angry. And I had to get over that and realize that fourth part of that inventory, what was my role in these issues? And I started taking responsibility for what I had allowed those issues to do to me, which prevented me from becoming the person that my higher power wanted me to be. Was I so angry that I couldn't see straight, and so I dealt with everybody the same way? It didn't matter. It helped fuel my character defects to the point where I was unable to function in society in a responsible and productive way. That I was constantly wanting to look for a way to make myself feel better. And so I had to get away. I had to realize that the problem is self. Clancy I, who was the managing director of the downtown LA mission, died here a few years ago with 60 plus years of sobriety. He spoke at a local men's recovery center here, and I had never put these two things together. He said, we're not alcoholic because we think alcohol is the problem. We're alcoholic because we think alcohol is the solution. And I was the person who thought that alcohol was the solution and that I was going to fix everything, and it was everybody else's fault if I felt bad, which alcohol was the problem. The alcohol in me was the problem. Therefore, I was the problem. And if I wasn't able to work on myself, I was not going to be successful in recovery.
Mm. No, that's powerful. And I think what I'd like to do is transition to that, because you talked about, yeah, I had the obsession of alcohol, and then it became the obsession of blame, of blaming others. Tell me about how that coincides and how that goes along with what you just shared about how alcohol is the solution. Is blaming the solution also to one who has the obsession of blaming?
The obsession of blaming is what entered into my marriage with my wife. It's your fault the marriage isn't working correctly. You didn't do this the way I wanted you to do this. You haven't done this the way I want. You didn't do this on the Thursday that I wanted you to do. You did it this way. I told you to do it that way. So I'm constantly blaming my wife for actions that I had full responsibility for. And it was her fault, things that I wrote. If you fix yourself, we wouldn't be fighting like this. And so the obsession of blame, I didn't necessarily have that with people on the outside. I dealt with that in the fourth step. But it was just, for me, it was very difficult to try to take that same response to the outside world and apply it in the relationship that I was emotionally tied to. Here I had my emotions that I didn't like to share. And when my emotions came into play, they did not feel comfortable. And as a drunk, what did I do to my emotions? I poured booze on them. No, I'm not pouring booze on them. Now it's your fault I feel bad. And I had to get over that. I had to realize that I had a responsibility in our relationship for the chaos and the dysfunction that was occurring. And that I had a role and responsibility in this relationship to do something about me so that we could get along. There's somebody who said once in the book, he says, when you get married, you know what the other person's like. If they improve after that, that's gravy, but you knew what they were like the day you married them. And me, I just kept putting false expectations. They say in AA, an expectation is just a premeditated resentment. I had all these expectations on what I thought you should be. And most of the time I was just upset with myself, but I was blaming it on her. And not a healthy way to be.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, John. That's very helpful for me to hear that. We had a question come in from our live audience here, and it's directed towards me, John. But I'd also like to ask you it, and then I'll be happy to give my take on this and see what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on addiction and alcoholism being two separate things? Is it categorized as the same, maybe a drug addiction or food addiction or sex addiction or whatever it may be in alcoholism? What are your thoughts on that topic?
I am not a professional therapist, so whatever I say is taken as a layman, if you will. I believe that addiction is an unhealthily acquired habit, for lack of a better word, that we put ourselves through to prevent us from dealing with the real issues that are going on. I believe that there is such a thing as a physical addictions for alcohol. I believe I had a physical addiction. Withdrawal is a sign that I was physically addicted to that. But I have seen through RCA with the number of people in there who are codependency is an addiction. It's an addiction on approval for other people. Drugs, sex, gambling, it doesn't matter. Each one of those addictions has this ability to wreak havoc in a person's life and in a person's relationship. I've got a child who's got a gambling problem. It's not active today because he did something about it, but it was wreaking havoc in his life. You think, well, he's not out chasing women and drinking beer and blah, 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 blah. But nevertheless, that addiction wreaked havoc. So addiction is addiction, you know, and some addictions may seem on paper more serious than other addictions. Obviously, somebody with a gambling habit is not going to be swerving down the road going crazy like a drunk, but nevertheless, they can still wreak the same havoc on their friends and family and their jobs and everything else. And I believe that addictions require some form of a spiritual program of 12-step recovery. I believe that when the founders of AA decided or determined that it required one alcoholic working with another, I believe that to be true because there's been nobody in my life who's been able to reach me like another alcoholic in dealing with my alcoholism. There's been nobody been able to reach me concerning my family issues than another family who's gone through it as well. And that's why the sponsor couple helps because they teach us through their experience, strength, and hope what they did to work through their issues. And although the issues may look a little bit different on paper, the process is still the same. I had somebody in one meeting sit there and say that everything leads to resentment. You take all the negative emotion and it leads to resentment. You're really, really sad about something, there's probably resentment in there. I mean, it all generally boils down to one thing. And in my addiction here, it did that. There's something eating away at me that I have to fight back on that I refuse to let go of. What is resentment? Resentment is the poison that I take that I want to give to you, right? And they say in the big book of AA that resentment is the number one offender. Resentment in my marriage, resentment in my personal life, resentment in myself, and all the things that I'm dissatisfied with just led me straight into addiction. And when those resentments get high enough or strong enough, then the obsession to drink returns. And then I'm in a world of shit. It's just that, when that obsession to drink starts creeping back in, I'm in trouble. And so I have to fight it on a daily basis by actively participating in this program and doing the steps.
Thank you for sharing that, John. And I'll jump in and share kind of the same thing. I am not a professional of any way, shape, or form. I'm a guy that sits behind a microphone and asks questions and works my recovery as like a madman as well as I can. But where I go to is to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, page 44, the first paragraph in We Agnostics. If when you honestly want to, you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, eating, sex, gambling, whatever it may be, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. You are probably an addict. And that's where I kind of go to. I see them, the big book, I can change that word drinking or alcohol or whatever to whatever it is that is ruining my life and ruining the lives of those around me because of my actions, behaviors, whatever it may be when in that place, even when sober, and the blaming or the procrastination or the jealousy or the whatever it may be is destroying my life and their life. So yeah, thanks for that question. That was Dorinda. Thanks for that question, Dorinda, for asking that. Next question from our live audience comes from Nikita. Nikita, when your emotions are elevated, blood boiling, frustration, and anger, how do you not go back to your default of blaming others as a first reaction? What is your process to show up as a person in recovery at that moment of anger?
I would like to say I go to Taco Bell, but that doesn't always work. Working with our sponsor couple, we were taught some tools of recovery. One is called a moratorium or a timeout. One is called a meeting of two. There are a variety of different tools that were introduced to us where we could sit there, and if something got too hot, one of us could call a timeout and the whole thing was supposed to stop. Now, of course, it requires both of us to go ahead and adhere to that. A timeout is not a flashing red light. It is a solid red light. And so then we come back when the emotions are less heated or less heightened, and we talk about it another time. So the process would be, oh, we're yelling, screaming, hollering, and somebody goes, stop. I'm calling a timeout. Now, you got to both agree to do this. I will call a timeout. I want to come back and talk about this tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We set a time to reconvene and discuss it. The other thing, too, as it was pointed out to me, is that my marriage to my wife is not defined by the weather today. Our marriage is multifaceted. There's a variety of different facets to it, each of which plays an important part in the stability of the marriage. And to think that one problem is going to be, and this is what I did, one problem would be the defining. If I have a problem in this area, my whole marriage is shit. It's just no good. I don't want to be here anymore. Okay. That's my addiction talking, my addiction telling me, oh, yeah, because easiest excuse to drink over was everything's crap. Let's have a drink, right? Pour me, pour me, pour me another. And so I had to learn. My wife also has said, we talk about the dance. That's a common lingo. It only takes one of us decide to get out of the dance for it to stop. And it's not like this came overnight. Okay. Our fightings got less. Okay. They de-escalated somewhat over time. But working with our sponsor couple and learning that I could express my needs to my wife in a safe and nurturing environment became better than screaming at her to get it all better. I was addicted to the fact that I could not scream enough to fix stuff. I could not drink enough to fix stuff. Same pattern. I thought the insanity was that I could just keep yelling and yelling and yelling, and this was going to get better. And I had to come to Jesus on that to realize that what I was doing was not getting me what I needed, that I was continuing to fight to get what I wanted, and it wasn't working. I was not satisfied with what I wanted, either consciously or unconsciously. So with the training through the sponsor couple, learning that my wife was a safe place, we've got out of the situation where we're having these elevated feelings and we're fighting with each other. It took practice, it took guidance, and it took commitment on both of our parts to try to de-escalate when the situations were getting out of hand. When we got to RCA, we fought every night in the car coming home. Well, the worst fights we had because our way of doing business for all those 30 some odd years was now being challenged. How am I going to survive in the relationship if I can't scream at you anymore? How am I going to survive in the relationship if I can't blame you anymore? So, one, it required to answer the question, it required a commitment on my part to do something different, just like AA. You know, the insanity of the disease was thinking that a drink was going to fix everything. I had to get away, that the blame was not going to fix anything, that the yelling and screaming is not going to fix it. Two was to learn to trust her, that she and I were committed to the same thing, and that we had positive ways to work out our differences so we didn't have to yell and scream and holler. But the best way we found was to de-escalate, was to back away from the situation. Because when one person's talking facts and one person's talking from emotion, it doesn't work. You've got to get to the point where both people are on the same plane emotionally in order for the conversation to be successful. And what would happen was she would be all emotional. It's like, I don't like the way you're talking to me. Well, now you're not talking about the topic anymore. So the discussion is how you're talking about it and not what you're talking about. And we got to the point where we could set ourselves into a place where we could talk about what we needed to talk about in a safe environment so that we could move forward from whatever the obstacle was that we created for ourselves.
Yeah, thank you, John, for going through that. I love the couple things you said there. Timeout is a solid red light, not a flashing red light. I think that's important to sit back and ponder on and sit on that because that's a powerful concept. And then you said a phrase that I'm sure you've heard or said in a million different places, but for whatever reason, and I've probably heard it before too, but for whatever reason, it stuck into me. Pour me, pour me, pour me another. Man, that is such a powerful phrase for me to grasp a hold of and take on with me here. I've got a question for you about RCA, John. So my wife and I both work our respective programs like bats out coming out of hell. We are very serious about our programs and working in. I have never heard of RCA before today. How do people typically come into these meetings? How could we find more about them so that if this is something that would be good for us in our own relationships and our own marriages, whatever we may be, how do you go about doing that?
Okay. Recovering Couples Anonymous has a website, recovering-couples.org, or you can call me or Google it somewhere. And there's a series of live meetings and Zoom meetings around the world. And there's a meetings tab on that, and you can find that pretty quick and get into what are there might be the codes for the Zoom meeting, or there might be a contact individual or email account that you'd call to get information for it. And show up at a meeting. That's all. Most of the meetings are open.
Mm-hmm.
Some closed meetings. Some that deal with some of the S addictions are often closed because there's an extra privacy concern there.
Okay.
But the meetings generally they're attended by people with anywhere from a few weeks to multiple years of coupleship recovery. And so through that website, recovering-couples.org, on the meetings tab, you can get started. There's no dues or fees. Everything's free. We go to one hybrid meeting on Saturday night and one Zoom meeting on Wednesday night. And we occasionally go to different meetings just to get different perspectives.
Mm. No, that's powerful. And are both couples typically an addict, an alcoholic, or is it like sometimes it's a quote unquote normie with an addict, or what does that look like?
My wife's a normie, so that's it. But generally, RCA suggests that both participants in the coupleship maintain activity in whatever programs that they are in. It is not a substitute for any other program. We had one couple show up one night, thought it was about couples getting sober together, and they looked rather really concerned when we explained what it was. They never came back. They thought it was, they wanted to get sober together, so they thought RCA was the place to. No, it's not about RCA is not about sobriety. It's about restoring a coupleship. And there's a comment here too. RCA primarily is coupleships. It doesn't matter how the coupleship is built. Okay, there's a variety of configurations of coupleships. They do, I think, have a position against polygamy. We're not really built to handle that. It's two partners together. Sometimes one person in the coupleship will come to the meeting and the other one doesn't. That's welcome. Because sometimes you got someone in your family, you got sober, the other person didn't. Well, you're still going to go to A. They may see the example and come along. So, but it is basically for couples.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, John. It's very helpful, and I think, well, I know that I and my wife will be looking into this, as I think we are looking at ways to strengthen our marriage relationship. We feel that we're both pretty good with between us and our higher power, and we're trying to work that together. But I think any resource that can help is one that is worth looking into. I've got a couple more questions, and we've got time for a few more questions from the live audience. If they have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat there. One thing that you mentioned was intimacy anorexia, John. You said there was a book. You mind sharing? Is that the name of the book, Intimacy Anorexia, and then tell us a little bit more about that concept.
The guy's name was Doug Weiss. He's got a counseling center in Colorado Springs, I believe it is. But it's called Intimacy Anorexia. In the back of one of the RCA books, they've got a thing called if I can find it here, it's characteristics of spiritual divorce. And I don't have the Intimacy Anorexia book, so I don't want to quote from it here. But for example, spiritual divorce, my wife and I used these 20 some odd points here, and we rated them on a scale each month. And the ones that looked like they were causing us trouble became the topics of our discussions for subsequent weeks. And then we re-rate the things in a month later. But, are there prolonged periods of sadness about the state of our coupleship and how it affects our family? Something that would obviously cause us to withdraw from each other. Or indifference to each other's problems. Have I become indifferent to you? Have I withdrawn from you? If she feels I'm indifferent, she might rate that as very high. If I don't feel like she's been indifferent, or then I might rate it low. But nevertheless, we gave a score to each of these things, and then each month we went through them, trying to find the trouble points and then give us something to work on. Being an engineer, measuring is something very important to me, and you could give them pass or fail, or whatever the case. But intimacy anorexia basically built up over a long time a fear of expressing emotions, where you go to a state withdrawn. I was totally emotionally withdrawn. And at some point in my life, my wife expected emotional maturity more than I was able to provide. And so the withdrawal was on. I cannot compete with you in the ring, so I'm not going to. I'm backing down. And that got to be a long time, well ingrained defense mechanism for myself, which was anything but productive in our relationship. I wouldn't tell her stuff that I needed to tell her. You know, how am I going to tell her she's doing okay? All I was really telling her by the way I was acting, she wasn't doing okay. And my wife had spent 13 years in an abusive relationship when she was a young woman. And here I am doing the same thing. When we met, she found out I was going to meetings. She almost didn't want to continue going out with me. But she figured, well, he's been sober 3 years and he's taking care of his kids. He must be okay. So she gave me a second chance because she divorced her first husband for alcoholism. And very shortly into that marriage. And so here I am taking the person that I love and I'm doing all this stuff to her that she couldn't imagine I would be doing to her. And I'm not saying she's perfect in every respect, but she'll have to talk about her own defects at some point. But here, if you love me, you wouldn't do that to me. That's true, but I was doing it to her. And the fact was, I was unable to love her the way she needed to be loved because I couldn't love myself. I ran from anything that felt emotional. And now they joke about it now. Someone's on from my regular morning meeting. They call me Captain Crunch because, one of my daughters goes, when I get emotional, she says, "Oh, Dad, don't get crunchy." And I can get emotional today, and that's okay. I have cried a few times, but I'm learning to be the person my higher power wanted me to be. And one of the things that's very important for my wife that I've realized is that somehow she has a God given mission, and it's my responsibility as her husband to help her fulfill that mission. I have a God given mission, whatever that may be, and it's partly her responsibility to help support me in fulfilling that mission. And then together, working from that perspective, we see that we both have eternal value, that we both have a reason that we're together. If we trust that a higher power brought us together, there was a reason. And we see each other through a different set of glasses. It's like they talk in the big book about having the glasses on backwards.
Mhm.
You
This is
start
beautiful.
valuing
Yeah.
what's in our life.
I'm excited to delve into this further in my own relationship. One more question before we start wrapping this up, John. Um, the question I have is: you mentioned the me I had grown up with for, I think you said, 62 years had to go away. And what did I have to do to learn then? What was one of the things you've learned about yourself, about different things in life, as that me that you grew up with for 62 years has gone away?
It says in chapter 3 of the big book, there's 4 key words: obsession, illusion, delusion, and insanity. And Joe and Charlie put it quite nicely. They're all 4 words, meaning basically that I'm believing in something that's not true. For years and years and years, I had a false belief system that everybody around me was trying to screw me, and that wasn't true. I had a belief system that said I had to be a certain way to be of service to my wife, and I was going to be that way whether she liked it or not. All illusion, and that was me. I could see clearly from the example that I was presented, I had no business ever getting into a relationship with anybody. I had no business, but yet here I go. I was 20 years old when I first got married, and I was a raging alcoholic. Had no business getting into that relationship. I had no business getting anywhere. I did not know, but I did not know I had no business being in a relationship. And no, many people realize they have no business getting in a relationship. But it took a lot of pain, a lot of tears for me to realize that I needed to change me if this was going to work, that I could not rely on her to make changes, and that her changes may be faster or slower than mine, but that both of us were working and we're both committed to this. And regard where each one, I may be higher in one area than she is, and she may be higher in another area than me. It doesn't matter anymore. We're in this together and we're going to work through this. And I can go to her with just about anything. We did an exercise a few months ago. We read a book and they talked about forgiveness. We picked 8 or 9 things, made a list of major uh-ohs in our marriage. And from that list, we culled down to about 5, and we did a formal forgiveness exercise, answering about 12 questions face to face for each one of those. And gee whiz, who said by writing it down and talking about it, it just sort of goes away? I don't know where anybody got that idea, but all of a sudden we started looking at each other in a new light. And because my wife said one day, I just don't think we've ever healed. And so we started doing these other exercises to try and heal, and it started working.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate your willingness to share. And this is a resource that I think at least several people in this meeting that's live here and those that are listening will be looking into this, because I think that's one of the big things that is lacking in my life, is that additional connection with my wife. And this has been very powerful for me. If for nobody else, I'm grateful that I was here. So thank you for this fantastic RECO12 weekly speaker meeting.
And one more note.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, John. Yeah.
On my ex-wife's family, they have a serial killer.
Oh, wow.
I'm glad I got out of there.
Yeah. Wow.
So we
Yeah.
talk about the family of origins, but we bring that stuff with us. And we don't think we're doing it. I mean, I told myself I'm not going to be like my parents. I'm not going to be like my parents. But yet I became as emotionally unavailable as my parents. So anyway, that's all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I that's a powerful experience or exercise you did about identifying those people in your family tree. All right. So if you have any other questions to our live audience, if you'd like to make contact with John, send an email to me at RECO12pod@gmail.com, RECO12pod@gmail.com. I'll funnel those questions, get you connected with John through there. Next week, come back, because we've got another first-time speaker, Constance S., whose topic will be staying sober in a world that celebrates alcohol. And I think that's going to be it could be a powerful follow-up. I mean, John shared a little bit about his time in the military, where every day, every week, it was all about that and celebrating alcohol. How do I stay sober in those types of situations? I really look forward to her experience, strength, and hope next week. And if you'd like to be considered as a future RECO12 speaker, send me an email, once again, to RECO12pod@gmail.com, and we'll get that set up. Now, let's launch off into the rest of the day with the third step prayer. John, are you willing to say that for us?
Sure. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Thank you, John. Remember, everybody, there is one who has all power. That one is a being that I choose to call God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me. Your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place. And I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me, your touch is grinding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low. But now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.